Then we sort of get to the rest of it. So I stick in here a little bit about why it's hard in technology to make design operative, why very often stuff doesn't get designed very well in these areas. You know, if you have been in your life, or you have relatives in your life who are a little bit older who have been gray box users, you know, we have generations and generations of really ugly computing equipment that may or may not have been wholly functional for various reasons. Lots of stuff that gets made in these areas doesn't work right. I spend a lot of time doing demos. I just did one, spent a lot of time in Second Life. Sometimes it doesn't work right. There's just, you know, lots of stuff that we make that doesn't work the way it's supposed to, or doesn't look the way it maybe should, and there are a lot of reasons for it. These are some of them, not all of them. There's some of them that Norman talks about with regard to technology and innovation altogether. They're not problems that are always endemic to computing systems, but they overlap on computing systems, and some of them are just about computing systems. The first one is that innovation is happening really fast, and it's really hard for humans to adapt. And, you know, so you got dinosaurs who just can't adapt fast enough, and then you got other users for whom the stuff is just changing so fast. It's just hard to keep up. I quit teaching production. I can't keep up. You know, I taught 113 for 7 years, and it got to the point at the end where I wasn't a very good 113 teacher. I felt kind of bad for the students who had to take that last class and a half that I taught. I just can't. It just changes too fast. Bloody 8 pieces of software every summer, you know, to a new version. Some of it altogether new. So I just couldn't keep up with it. I can still do some stuff. You know, if I have to make a movie, I can make a movie. If I have to make a sound file, I'm a little better in sound than I am in other stuff, and I can, you know, I don't do Flash at all, but there's some stuff I can do. But I just couldn't keep up with all of it, you know. And same thing with users. They can't keep up with all of it either. You know, and we're seeing this more and more and more and more, and it's kind of dramatic. We didn't expect it. It's a little bit of a surprise, and yet it's sort of expected. And I've mentioned it before. It's that television channel effect. You give them 200, they still use 5, 6, maybe 8, but never more than that. And we've got all these expanding capabilities with new media. Everybody can do everything. And when you really stop and look at what people do with their machines, it isn't very darn much. You know, Facebook, social media has kind of leapfrogged email a little, although all social media is still platformed on email. Okay? But boy, you get most users past email, Facebook, and maybe one other thing, and you pretty much exhausted what they're going to do today among this huge panoply of stuff that they could be doing with their machines. And part of it is it's just changing so fast that it's hard for people to keep up. So that also affects designers, right? I know people in this town who still use Photoshop 3 because it did everything that they professionally. I don't mean people, you know, like lay users. I mean graphic designers who still use 3 because it did everything they ever needed to have done, and anything else that came along was just a bell and a whistle. And now they have a copy, but they just never use it. Okay? We'll talk about this in other concepts, but you could open Word right now, and you could find 140 functions that no one ever uses. And every time it comes out, it's bigger and more bloated, and it's got more stuff. And good Lord, it can do everything but date you now. Okay? And people want a typewriter. I mean, pretty much. Okay, every once in a while somebody wants to do a little newsletter, but good Lord. Aesthetics don't equal usability. Just because it looks nice doesn't mean that it's going to work. So we've got some broad generalizations here, and if you're in any of these departments, don't get offended, okay? Because they're broad, they're stereotypes that are overblown. But the fact was, when we started the Bloody program, we started it because back then, employers came to us and said, you know, those guys in computer science can get us our stuff made, but it looks like, it's just, it's awful. And they'd come to us and they'd say, you know, we got these art kids, and this stuff looks all artsy-fartsy. It looks great, but you know what? It doesn't work. Yeah, we got these comm kids that we hired, and they sort of know a lot about communicating with people and strategy, but they can't get anything done. Can't anything made. And we went, bing! Multimedia! You know, and put them together. Strategies with art, design, and code. And that's not what we do still, right? You know. So I'm not picking on the art guys, but it's fact. Just because it looks nice doesn't mean it's going to work right. And there is kind of this draw sometimes to making it look really great. And sometimes that doesn't help. Sometimes that's not the right piece. Designers are never typical users, and this goes further than design. Hold your fingers up like this. Just like this, right in front of you. Turn it like this. Right at that person. That person is not a typical user. You're geeks. You don't count. And the guy next door, the guy down the street, the guy you're making for is not as skilled as you are, as aware as you are. They haven't used it. You've been working on it. Designers aren't users. And it's really hard to remember that. You design for yourself, really, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, I got something to buy this. You know? And even when you're designing for somebody else, you're thinking about what you really want. And it's a hard one. It's really hard when you're designing practical things for people to use, to think about what they want instead of what you want. And then the other part with that one, not typical users, designers work for clients. They hardly ever work for end users. This is really difficult. It's a fact of the organizational world that we live in, of the economies that we live in. You have to be real careful about it, but you don't get many jobs where you actually get more than testing kind of contact with end users. If the developer's any good, the firm's any good, they do get you some end users to test with once in a while. You know, you can't really develop much without eventually the end users touching it. But the fact is, in most cases, the guy or gal paying the bills, writing your check, isn't the end user. They're the client. And the client says, I want big buttons. And the end users go there and they have little tiny fingers and they're looking for little buttons. Right? And you go, well, really, they need little buttons, not big buttons. And the guy goes, no, I want big buttons. And that's what you give them. And it's a design, sometimes it's a real design problem because they won't let you do the right thing. They're paying the bills. That's what happens. So part of what happens is then you get in that, you're sort of the advocate as the designer for the user, you know, trying to get the research in, the data in, give it to the client saying, look, here's why I want to do this. It doesn't come naturally to most clients. Design is for everybody. There isn't a business going right now that I'm aware of that doesn't want to be Microsoft. Microsoft just signed a cross-patent agreement with Google. How the hell that's going to work out, but they're sharing their patent portfolios, so you know we got a micro Google now thing going on that we didn't have before. This business tends toward monopoly. We'll get to a concept of that says that later, but this business tends toward the urge to monopoly. So that means I want to sell it to everybody. And that's why I put everything in Word but the kitchen sink, because I want it to be for everybody. When that secretary goes to do a newsletter, I want him or her to be able to use Word, not have to switch over to something else, Quark or PageMaker or some other product, right? I want to capture everybody. But there's a problem with that. See him? Look at him. Look at him. Look at him. You look at him. He's not everybody. He's special. So are you. So are you. So am I. So these generalized things go to individual people. That's what market and demographics is about. But remember, in new media, you got this pulled stuff. You got this ability to track. The reason the audience is worth more is they're more individualized. You can get to them better, right? So you kind of leave the mass media sort of thing and the mass marketing sort of thing, and you get down to these niche folks. That's what's at the end of the tail. All right? And even if you're in the great middle, at least you know a lot about them. You know why they're there, other than just that they're white and 47, which is what you knew before. Now you know a lot about them. Okay? So the problem is, how do you make that product that appeals to everybody, but yet is adjusted design-wise for each individual user? It's hard. So that's a challenge. There are these two features: the gulf of execution and the gulf of evaluation. First one, the perceived difference, or the difference between the perceived and interpretable physical representation of the system and the intended actions. And I have the same exercise for this for 10 years, and you shall get it as well. Go over to the library, stop before you go in, and look at all of the signage for entering the library and follow the rules. And you will learn about the gulf of evaluation, because if you look at the signage and follow all the rules, you can't get in. And that will teach you about the gulf of evaluation, the difference between the perceived and interpretable physical representation of the system and the intended actions. Because essentially what happens is, when you look at all the signage, if you actually follow the rules, you would not be able to get into the door. Okay? So go try that, and you'll learn about that concept. Gulf of execution, you can find out whenever you open Photoshop and you make a mistake and you go to throw that item away and you put it in the big trash can instead of the little trash can, and it doesn't go away. And that will tell you about the gulf of execution. You take that sucker and you go, and you put it in the little trash can and off it goes. But when you did it to the first one, that's the gulf of execution. What you intended didn't work.